The numbers lit up the screen within hours. 5.7 million global streams in a single day. A number 3 debut on the worldwide chart and a commanding number 1 in the United States. With Risk It All, Bruno Mars didn't just release a new song, he reignited a cultural moment. The single's explosive debut on Spotify signals more than chart success. It marks a defining chapter in Bruno Mars' return to solo superstardom. After years of collaborations, selective appearances, and strategic silence, the Grammy-winning artist has stepped back into the spotlight with precision. Risk It All arrives not as a nostalgic echo of past glory, but as a bold reaffirmation of artistic control, ambition, and emotional storytelling. For casual listeners, Bruno Mars has always seemed effortless, an entertainer who can sing, dance, write, and produce at the highest level. But his rise was anything but easy. Born Peter Gene Hernandez in Honolulu, Hawaii, he was performing on stage as an Elvis impersonator before most children learned long division. His early exposure to classic rock, Motown, and R&B shaped a musical vocabulary far broader than his peers. By the time he broke through with Just the Way You Are in 2010, he wasn't simply chasing trends, he was reviving them. Over the next decade, Bruno Mars built one of the most consistent hit catalogs in modern pop. Albums like Doo-Wops and Hooligans and Unorthodox Jukebox delivered global smashes, while 24K Magic redefined retrofunk for a new generation. His collaboration project Silk Sonic with Anderson, .Pac earned critical acclaim and major awards, proving his commitment to musicianship over algorithm-driven shortcuts. Yet after the Silk Sonic wave subsided, questions lingered. When would Bruno Mars return solo, and what would that sound like in a streaming-dominated era? Risk It All answers both questions with clarity. The track blends cinematic strings, mariachi-inspired brass textures, and a soaring vocal performance that recalls his early ballad roots while pushing into new territory. The production feels expansive but intimate. It is romantic, dramatic, and unapologetically theatrical qualities that have long defined Bruno Mars' signature style. Within hours of release, fans flooded social media with clips of the chorus, praising the vocal control and emotional depth. Industry insiders were not surprised. A Los Angeles-based producer who has worked with multiple Grammy-winning artists described the track as a masterclass in controlled drama, noting that Bruno Mars understands dynamics better than almost anyone in mainstream pop. A senior music critic at a major U.S. publication called the single a reminder that streaming metrics may dominate the industry, but true star power still drives cultural conversation. The streaming figures reinforce that point, debuting at number 3 globally with 5.7 million streams and number 1 in the US with over 2.3 million streams on day 1 positions, Risk It All among the strongest solo launches of the year. In an era when attention spans are short and competition is relentless, those numbers suggest both anticipation and loyalty. Bruno Mars does not flood the market. He times his releases carefully. And when he moves, the industry responds. Behind the scenes, however, the story is more nuanced. Sources close to the project say Bruno Mars spent nearly 2 years refining material before selecting Risk It All as the lead release tied to his new creative era. Unlike earlier albums that leaned heavily on collaborative writing camps, this phase reportedly involved a tighter circle of musicians and analog recording sessions. Live instrumentation played a major role. Studio engineers describe late-night sessions where Mars would redo a single vocal run dozens of times, searching not for perfection, but for feeling. That dedication has long been a defining trait. Musicians who have toured with him consistently highlight his rehearsal intensity. One former band member once said, "He rehearses like he's the opening act, that's why he performs like a legend." It's a philosophy rooted in humility and discipline, qualities that don't always surface in headlines but quietly sustain longevity. Culturally, the timing of this release matters. American pop music is currently dominated by genre-blending experimentation, viral dance hooks, and short-form content optimized for social media. Bruno Mars enters that landscape with a different proposition. Instead of chasing virality, he delivers craftsmanship. Instead of minimalist production, he embraces lush arrangements. In doing so, he offers a counterpoint to the stripped-down aesthetic dominating playlists. That contrast may explain why his influence remains so potent. Younger artists frequently cite Bruno Mars as a blueprint for performance excellence. His emphasis on live vocals, synchronized choreography, and band chemistry recalls an earlier era of showmanship associated with icons like Michael Jackson and Prince, yet it feels modern rather than derivative. He has become a bridge between generations, connecting classic R&B traditions with contemporary pop accessibility. Music business analysts also note that Bruno Mars represents a rare hybrid in today's industry, a streaming powerhouse who still commands ticket sales and brand partnerships at elite levels. His Las Vegas residencies have consistently sold out, and insiders suggest that a new touring announcement could follow the momentum of Risk It All. If that happens, the single may serve as both artistic statement and strategic launchpad. There is also a personal dimension shaping this era. Friends describe Bruno Mars as increasingly selective about public appearances, prioritizing creative control over constant visibility. That restraint has cultivated anticipation rather than fatigue. In a media cycle that rewards overexposure, he has chosen scarcity, and scarcity, when paired with quality, can amplify impact. Critics point out that Bruno Mars has occasionally faced debates about musical appropriation versus homage. Over the years, he has addressed those conversations by emphasizing his deep respect for Black American musical traditions and the collaborative nature of his work. "Music is about honoring what came before and pushing it forward," he said in a past interview. "That's the responsibility." With Risk It All, the influences feel integrated rather than borrowed, woven into a personal narrative rather than presented as aesthetic costume. The emotional core of the song appears to center on vulnerability, the idea of risking everything for love despite uncertainty. That theme resonates widely in a cultural climate marked by instability and rapid change. Listeners searching for sincerity often respond to grand romantic gestures in music, and Bruno Mars has long understood how to frame emotional stakes in universal language. From a broader industry perspective, the success of Risk It All reinforces a larger trend. Established artists with strong catalogs can still dominate streaming platforms when they align timing, narrative, and quality. It challenges the assumption that chart peaks are reserved solely for viral newcomers. Legacy, when carefully managed, can be an advantage. As awards season conversations begin to surface, speculation about Grammy consideration is inevitable. While it is far too early to predict outcomes, Bruno Mars' history with the Recording Academy positions him as a perennial contender. Yet beyond trophies, the more significant measure may be cultural staying power. Songs that debut high are impressive. Songs that remain embedded in public memory define eras. In quiet studio corridors and sold-out arenas, the work continues. Those who have observed Bruno Mars up close describe a performer still hungry, not for validation but for evolution. That distinction may be the key to understanding his longevity. He is not chasing youth culture. He is refining his own lane within it. The future appears carefully mapped yet open-ended. Industry observers expect additional releases tied to this new chapter, possibly culminating in a full-length project that expands on the sonic palette introduced in Risk It All. If the early reception is any indication, audiences are ready. Ultimately, Bruno Mars' story is not just about chart positions. It is about endurance in an industry that often burns bright and fades fast. It is about balancing nostalgia with innovation. It is about knowing when to speak and when to wait. With Risk It All surging across streaming platforms, Bruno Mars once again demonstrates that star power, when paired with discipline and emotional clarity, remains unstoppable. The numbers tell one story. The music tells another. Together, they suggest that this chapter is not a comeback. It is a continuation of a legacy still very much in motion. Bruno Mars is back in the global spotlight, and the numbers speak for themselves. With his latest single, Risk It All, debuting at number 3 on the worldwide Spotify chart and soaring to number 1 in the United States, Bruno Mars once again proves why he remains one of the most powerful forces in American pop music. The explosive streaming debut marks a defining moment in his solo return, reaffirming his cultural relevance in a fast-moving, streaming-driven industry. For over a decade, Bruno Mars has shaped the sound of modern pop and R&B, blending classic influences with contemporary production. From his early breakout hits to Grammy-winning albums and sold-out residencies, he has built a reputation for precision, showmanship, and musical excellence. Now, with Risk It All, he signals a new era, one rooted in emotional storytelling and bold artistic control. Why does this matter to American audiences? Because Bruno Mars represents more than chart success. He bridges generations, revives live performance culture, and continues to influence the next wave of artists dominating today's charts. In an era of fleeting viral hits, his consistency stands out. Watch our full report for exclusive insights, industry reactions, and the bigger story behind Bruno Mars' latest milestone.